talk.
Hello, G. Michael Vasey, and welcome to another episode of the Magical World of G. Michael Vasey podcast. Well, those of you that know a bit more about me will know that a couple of years ago I had an encounter here in the Czech Republic with a shaman, a Slavic shaman. I've never met the man, but we interacted in some quite strange ways and probably continue to do so today. In fact, I ended up writing a series of books about the experience and where it took me in terms of earth energies and Slavic deities and that kind of thing, which I'll indicate down below in the notes for this session. Intrigued by what he was up to and some of the activities and designs and stone things that he was leaving around, I naturally did some research looking for someone who might be able to help, and I found a lady by the name of Phoenix out in the middle of the USA who was a shaman and a dreamer, and definitely being Polish of a Slavic origin. She helped me out a lot, and I ended up subscribing to her website, details below, and doing cyclical moon work with her and others that subscribe to her website as well. So to cut a long story short, today I'll be talking with Phoenix the Elder. And the conversation was fascinating. It starts good and it gets even better, and it went on for a long time. So I've actually split this into two separate episodes, both with Phoenix the Elder, and I guarantee you that the longer you listen, the more you will learn and the better it gets. Just to tell you a little bit about Phoenix, she chose from the beginning of her first awakening experience as an adult in 1987 to dedicate to healing her soul through her mind, body and emotional body. In 1987, she began to astral travel and have out of bodies naturally. And it goes on from there. A master dreamer, dream teacher, dream walker, time jumper, mythologist, lunar-synchronist, empath-healer, karmic soul initiator, meditation teacher, oracle seer, and exorcist in waking and night dreaming. She mastered Zen in the mid-90s and has taught Zen meditation and much, much more. Please welcome Phoenix.
My journey, I think, started really as a child. When I was really young, like 2 or 3, I would act like I was a black jaguar.
Really?
And yeah, and I would go on all fours and I would like kind of master the run, and I'd growl. I wouldn't talk to people. And I come from a large Polish family, of course, so crazy, different, it was always accepted. And, by the time I was 5, I kind of started to perfect sort of the feeling, because I would dream with a black jaguar all the time. Then I'd made my parents feed me on the floor like a black jaguar. And my oldest sister says, you were the spirit of the jaguar or the lion or whatever you were trying to be. So that's kind of when I knew that I was a little different than everybody else in the large family. And then around 6 years old or 7 years old, I really didn't want to go to school. I just knew that it wasn't my place. I knew that I didn't want to do it. So my mom put that off for a year. She let me skip like kindergarten or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so when I did get to school finally in first grade, at night I would try to go to sleep and I couldn't go to sleep. I would either being sucked up, I would literally feel my body being sucked up, or I would be like falling in the underworld. I didn't know it was the underworld until I was older, of course. So that started when I was a child. And what I would do is I would go to school, sit in the back, and just with my eyes open, meditate. So I was kind of present, but I was really sleeping. Right. And then at night, I would try to stay awake as long as I could so I didn't experience those two things.
Yeah.
Eventually, when my soul would be sucked up out of my body, I was going up on a military ship and I was fully awake. So I would be sitting in what looked like an airplane, in dreaming, everything's projected. So I would be in the back of the airplane and I would see all these adults, but they were all humped over. And I would be like seeing what was going on. There would be doctors kind of humped over and doing things, and nurses and military people. And then I would just observe. And as they would come down the aisle, because they were doing things to everybody who were slumped over sleeping. But since I was fully awake, I just, when you're a kid, you just observe. And being at the bottom of a big family, I was a good observer. So by the time they were halfway down the aisle of the ship, the plane, I would pretend like I was asleep and I would bend over.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't really remember what they did to me. But then, at past the REM time around 3:30 or 4, I would wake up in my bed. So I really tried hard to stay awake as a child. And you know how it is with children, try to wake them up, right? At 1 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
So it was really taxing and stressful, and it made me sort of a crabby child. But, I come from a lot of very esoteric musicians, creative people. So it wasn't that odd. So that's how it kind of started for me. There was a lot of things that I experienced when I got older as a dream walker, when I could go consciously on a military ship, which people call UFOs. I even wrote, and I think only because it was such an impactful thing that happened to me as a kid. And back then, as you know, you couldn't just look something up on the computer or even books. So for me, my experiences in life actually helped validate what I was experiencing. And I remember, like, back in 1995, 94, I had written all the UFO directors around the world and said, hey, these aren't from off planet. These are US, Saudi, Russian military ships. And I said, I wrote this letter, mailed it to them. And, they all called me crazy, of course, because they like the chase. They don't want to know what's on the ship. They just want the chase because it's big business. Everything's big business, as you know. Write a book, have people listen to your story without experience. So nobody wanted to listen to me forever. And, now I think in the last 5-10 years, people are getting a clue that when a UFO shows up, Air Force is right there, guiding it along so it can land. In the 90s, as an astrologer, I had Uranus and Neptune conjunct all my planets. So everything was opened, like as an adult. So I could see things in the daytime and understood what was going on. So for my world, that was just one part of it. That was my collective life. I had an interpersonal life and a personal healing life. So what got me really on a dedicated journey was sickness, soul sickness, the wrathful dismemberment that shamans go through. And I had collective work to do until 2012. I had to have it done. So I did it all by myself. I stayed out of the world. I didn't make a big to-do about things that I was doing. And once that was done, I felt really good.
So about 5 million questions already.
Yeah, go ahead. It's just a conversation, right?
Did you ever figure out what these people were up to in these ships? What they were trying to do?
Yeah. It's a huge collective story. Ancient humans have been around. We've all been researched, if you believe in reincarnation, over and over again. Because my journey after 30 years old was quite different than under 30, I took things more seriously. And because I was working on myself all the time as the major part of my journey, I was disciplining, and I mastered Zen in the 90s, and I was doing all kinds of things to help me stay grounded. So when I healed enough karma, I would say, and that's a whole nother subject about how that works, I began to sort of reclaim what was past some of the karma, which was my light, or the self before corruption of my own past lives. When that happened, my dreamer came back. And once my dreamer self came back, the part of me that didn't have karma, some people call it the higher self, then it busted open in dreaming. And then I began, like a scientist, just really going, okay, if I have to go through myself to get to the bigger picture, then I'll go as deep as I can and take all the risks, even death. And I did. I chose that. I felt like I've lived 4 lifetimes this lifetime, besides paying 3 past life karmas. So I could get to what the bigger picture was, because I knew there were puzzle pieces missing in mysticism and spirituality and teachings of any kind. And it seemed to me that that greatest picture of UFOs and aliens was not based on common sense. It was based on science fiction. It was based on things that seemed, ooh, it's like the way mythology and creativity and spirituality and religion all have sort of separate identities and information. I began to sort of weave the web, as they say, about putting pieces together, because I'm a symbolist and I'm a dreamer. I was born a dreamer. So some people call, the natives call a dreamer the last level of a shaman. And I had to kind of not use that word, because people became offended that a white young woman didn't have a Slavic background of shamans. They don't call them shamans. They call us folk healers and molfarkas and things like that. So I just kind of felt like I needed to understand that picture. I guess it was kind of a destiny. And what I learned was, when you get through all the difficult things to make life simple and simplify yourself, you get to the essence and the root of what anything is in religion and spirituality and divinity and divination, in esoteric and magic. And what I learned at the essence was ancient people who were not good, who were pharaohs or kings of Mesopotamia, and even a little bit older than that, maybe back 10,000 years ago, when this cycle had started, 10 or 12,000 years ago, was that the corrupt people, those who turned against themselves or balance, whatever you want to call it in your own language, when those people began to use war and separation, we'll call that the patriarch, when that really started, especially in Mesopotamia and very early Egypt, when that started, the people who actually did the killing and the ordering of the killing and the slavery, that's when they began to lose pieces of their soul. Now, those who know about soul work, we know there's fragments, and we know that there's pieces that are sort of chopped off of us and that's our shadow, our dark side. In that arena of our non-physical soul, we have pieces everywhere from the past where we turned against the light or turned against ourselves or took power and greed, right? What happened with some people was they lost their soul completely. And it's a long journey to completely lose aspects of your soul. When we reincarnate each time, we get a piece of soul from our light side, and that small 10% comes in our body, and we're able to live. If I unzip you and throw you out of your physical body would drop dead. Your soul would continue after death. What corrupt people did, they use the word evil, but everybody's got a good side and a dark side. Some just happen to have more of a dark side. So when these human beings lost their soul, what's left? a mental astral body. We have a soul astral body and a mental astral body. It's not hard to understand this. When anything in dreaming or, say, paganism or Ouija board speaks to you, it's a mental astral body. Whether it's alive or dead, it doesn't matter. On the other side, we have the soul body, which is dead silent. It cannot speak absolutely at all. It's visual. It's manifestations of visual. It's the soul, astral body. In ancient times, the greedy, the demonic, whatever you want to call humans who go against 100% and lose their soul, they have a mental astral body left. I think the biggest and oldest, and this is gonna disagree, a lot of people will disagree with this, but when you have a burning bush and a Moses, and you have something speaking, you have a mental astral body. Now, regardless of what your religion is, I don't care. I'm a very spiritual person. I believe in all, and I believe in the creative side as an artist as well. And there's a little bit of truth in all of them, but there's a whole lot of corruption in all of them too. That is a mental astral body. And what aliens are is a human who lost their soul and cannot reincarnate anymore at this level. I call them hungry ghosts. And they'll come to you. And Joe down the street who just died will also speak to you, or an ancient. And I know this because when I was awakening, I had what I call, what he called himself was an Akkadian. I didn't know what that meant. And it was the middle of the night. I was working on my computer. It was like 2 a.m. And I hear this disembodied voice speaking to me, telling me that he would give me all kinds of information and knowledge and all this stuff. And I was like, huh? I didn't speak. I knew not to speak to it. That's the kind of person I am. I had too many experiences as growing up. So I just listened. And he'd play little tricks and say, you hear the nightingale, the bird out, and I would hear a bird outside. And then he'd say, you hear it silent. I would hear it silenced. But I knew not to speak to it. Took me 30 years to realize, through everything I've been through, and in this last 12-year cycle, that was my third and final karmic man who was a magician, never did magic this lifetime, who was Akkadian in Mesopotamia. Took that long because the journey is long. So these soulless human beings who can't reincarnate, what becomes a resource? Our soul, our light. It's a resource. So when your telepathy is so strong that you can mind control a person, because for lifetimes you've had nothing but a mental astral body, you can say whatever you want. I'm Jesus. I'm this. I'm that. As long as you get somebody to listen to you. I was a kind of person who had a lot of common sense, observed a lot of things in my childhood, and said, I'm not listening. So after that happened with the Akkadian, really mystical things started happening, especially from Egypt and Mesopotamia. And one night I went to bed and I had these three things come in to talk to me. Now, as a woman, I get mad. I was working on my boundaries back then, and I'm like, who are you? You have no jurisdiction to come in my dream. I didn't invite you. Because I can speak the dream language at night and the waking life, the waking dream, as the same thing. And so they said, we want to give you mathematics to dematerialize matter. I didn't know what that was back in the 90s. I woke up going, who were these people who I could not see their soul body? Because the soul body it can be black, it can be gray, it can be light gray, it can be white. But the mental astral body is clear. And the only reason that I knew that these were mental astral bodies at that time was I had no visuals and dreams until my dreamer came back, my dreamer self. When everything lit up in my dream, I had image, I had, visuals, I saw people in my dreams. Before that, it was all black since I had been born, but I could see energetic shapes of human beings like energy, like heat rising from a road in the desert. So I was scared. First time experiences are very scary for anybody. So I was like, I'm leaving my body and going places I probably shouldn't go. I want to leave myself a message tonight. And all day I prepared. I sort of meditated, took a salt bath, did whatever I needed to do. So when I went to bed, I knew they were going to come back because everything in dreams runs in threes if it's important for me. So I didn't remember them coming back that second night. But I remember asking myself to leave a clue if I'm having an out of bodies. And, so when I woke up, I was laying in bed. It was a beautiful morning, had bright light shining in the bedroom. And I lift my head and I see pages and pages and pages of stuff all over my bed with a pen in my hand and a pad of paper in the other. I had no memory. I looked at one of the pieces of papers before I lifted my body, and it was all high physics mathematics. I'm the kind of person who changed schools, but so I wouldn't take math in high school. I still count on my fingers, even today. High physics mathematics. And the first thought I had was, I knew Einstein wasn't that smart. This math didn't come from me. It came from the humans who were mental, astral-bodied human beings who lost their soul. This is what aliens are. So I gathered them all up and I thought, I'm going to burn them because I'm a smart person. And I had a friend who was from Tokyo, who's Japan, who was a scientist. And I burned them all that morning. And then I told him the story. And he's like, I wanted to see him. And I said, what? To create another bomb? To create some cure for cancer that's already been solved? So I said, no, these aren't good things. These are bad things. If you have judgment, if you have common sense and judgment. So from that point on, I said, I don't really know who this group is, but like a bloodhound and a huntress from old, I'm going to hunt them for the rest of my life. And I did. And I found out the whole thing. And so it started that day. Things got really mystical, but I felt like I needed a balance. I had a goddess circle and I worked with women by that point. And I thought, okay, I'm going to test some of these old stories. So the first thing I tested was Lilith. I want to see if she's female. I want to see if all the corruption to put women down and make them evil was actually true. So when Passover came, that next Passover, I took my menses blood and I put it on the door and invited death in. 4 years of hell from that in my mystical experiences, but it ended full circle. I was already doing moon work with cycles and synchronicities and signs and made them very personal. I didn't want to be a person who just worked with knowledge. I wanted real experience, and you have to pay the debt for that. And my debt was 3 lifetimes of karma that opened up, but I had to do it because I knew I was supposed to. And, even very open-minded metaphysicians or spiritual people or whatever call me crazy. I remember 10 years later, I had a Rinpoche, a Buddhist master, look at me. And he knew something about me, even though I never really spoke. I went to a lot of different circles all over the spectrum just to learn, and at a certain period of my life. And he said, okay, how do you get from the 3rd dimension where we are at to the 5th dimension? I said, that's easy. You start here, you go all the way down to the underworld, or some part of you has to die and suffer. And then you come up back here at the 4th dimension, which is just consciousness. It's just you being more conscious from experience. And he just nodded his head and walked away. He didn't expect me to know that answer. It's like, but when you walk in the world with the real tools and the real experience, you have to work with everybody where they're at in the experience that they have. So you can relate to people who like go to the dentist and have a tooth pulled and they're in pain. So I decided at that moment I was only going to work with women, and I was going to work with women who were gifted like me. 20 years later, I had 12 apprentices who were dream hunters, and we did some work. That just ended. And I would be the one responsible for them all, because there were military trained dreamers that would come to beat us up. But if you can time jump 2 days, beat them over the head, and then time jump back, you're safe. I would have like a green ship above me with a guy in a NASA outfit going above my home when I would do ceremony at night with the full moon, because I used to do a water bowl, water and fire, my Slavic tradition. And so putting pieces together, when you study it all and you have multiple experiences of mysticism every week, it's constant work. But that's just that part of me. The other part of me was I really did want to heal my karma. And it was number one in my life, because I thought, I'm not going to hell, because I know what hell is. I know that it's a real place of low vibration where the shittiest things happen, and you don't have a body. And so there's no protection. So one of the reasons why Afghanistan, that's in the news right now, one of the reasons why they're so strong is because they're all mental astral bodied people. They can have out of body experience with their mind, and you can manipulate the physical world with the mental astral body. You can't do that with the soul. And I know, because I can do both. So the war is inside, right? The war is inside.
So let me ask you then, your opinion, if, let's say I have a guide, a voice that talks to me, what would you ascribe that voice to, even if that voice is helping you with spiritual matters, shows no interest in day-to-day or power? And in fact, in my instance, that voice is a female voice.
Okay. Let me put it in context. If you go down to Peru and do a shamanic plant ceremony, you have just entered a bed with 5,000 people. Okay. So where the disembodied voice comes from, obviously you have strong mental astral body qualities, right? It can be someone that you know, male or female or in between those, they, them, and that's their female side. And could be a good friend, could be somebody in the family, could be a spiritual friend you knew 10 years ago. That female speaker talks to you. That's one. Okay, so it can be very personal. Two, it can be your own mental astral body giving you advice from its own knowledge source. It can be a light or dark, and all these things can be light or dark. Remember, anything disembodied wants your light.
Well, let me ask you then, what if in certain states of meditation or other degrees of awareness, the voice has a body?
When it appears,
the person appears, or the entity appears in front of me. Actually, I think it's part of me, but I'm just.
Well, and that's true. What I tell people is to not just accept and to test.
Yeah.
So for like, that would be like, okay, for 1 year, I'm going to tell this talking voice that appears as a body, like an apparition or whatever. I'm going to tell it no. every single time it wants to talk to me for 1 year, and then I'll open it back up. But I'm not going to tell it that I'm going to open it back up and see what happens. When you give a piece of candy to a kid, it's going to be happy until you say no more. That works with anything spiritually, of anything that talks.
Mm-hmm.
It can go from light to dark in 2 seconds. What I tell my dreamers who are apprentices is that if they meet that in the dream world at night, to call it out. Say, show me your true self, show me your true self, show me your true self, and say it until they shapeshift into their original self. 99.999, it's dark.
Yep.
And I've had a lot of apprentices over the last 30 years. You don't know until you test it, and that means having appropriate boundaries for something disembodied. When dead people die, they can stay here for about a year. Remember, there's nature's laws and there's human laws around all of this that we're talking about. Human law can change anything that it wants into its own self-gratification, but nature cannot. Nature is authentic and pure. So after a year, when a loved one dies, nature comes sucking back into its womb, its belly, and brings you home to it, the vibration in which you have paid your karma up until that point. You know, ma'at with the feather and the soul, which one's heavier? If you did some karmic work, a mountain moves an inch every 10 years. So when you apply spiritual teachings, spiritual knowledge, religious knowledge to your real experience, now it gets dangerous. When I said I put my menses blood on that door and entered the story of the Jewish tradition, I did it with all of them. I did experiments with all of them. Yeah, I was at near deaths and died many times. So you can test this speaking disembodied person who appears as an image and investigate it and go down the rabbit hole. Then you'll know, because that's called experience. You have experience up to this level, take the next step. Is it going to be dangerous? That's a relative word in my eyes. We rarely die from challenging.
It's not the only one. I mean, I was at Mikulčice. I've been there several times. I'm mapping energy lines at that site. It's an old Slavic site. There are 12 churches there, 2 rotundas, and the rest are normal box-like churches, or the ruins of them. And I found an energy vortex in one of the rotundas, and I stood in the energy vortex and meditated. And immediately I had an image of a man dressed in, with silver hair, beard, dressed in strange clothes, with a stick, big staff. And I said, "Oh, who are you?" And he spoke his name in, I guess, Slavic language, and it came across to me as some weird, like, wildflower. And I worked with him and said, "Come on, try harder. I'm English. I don't get it." And I realized what he was saying was Volk Vzduk, which in English is wolf's breath. And he told me he was a shaman, and that the lines of energy that I was there dowsing and mapping and working with, to him and his people, were lines of, he called them rivers of light. In the Slavic era, they could see these rivers of light. And he said, "I'm here because you've shown an interest in these, and it's your destiny to do this work, and I want to help you with that." And I guess I have some kind of, I must have some kind of connection with the Slavic anyway, because I've developed a very deep affinity for the Slavic pantheon of gods and goddesses, and the Slavic fairy tradition, well, fairy tales and traditions and that kind of thing, which is why I found you in the first place, remember? And, you have an experience like that, and it seems deeply profound and doesn't seem negative in any shape or
No,
form.
no, not at all. Yeah, and he's a living man. He lives somewhere, and you haven't connected on the embodied plane. You
Oh my goodness me, you're giving me a real weird feeling.
Why?
You know, if you remember, when I first found you on the net, it was because I'd come across a shaman in my local area, and he's leaving all these stone designs.
Mhm.
And I never actually met him except that first night when I kept to my distance because I didn't want to disturb what he was doing. But then it seemed to me that he was not only doing something, but I was a part of it because he left these stone designs and things, and he knew that I knew because I was placing stones next to his, and he would move it to a different position to show that he knew I knew. And then at the end of this 3 month period, he wrote actually on a fence where he had been working a phrase which said something in Czech like "I can feel the blood within your body" or something. I can hear the sound of the blood within your body. And it seemed like this was an entire message for me. And I wrote a book called Chasing the Shaman because I felt like I was chasing this guy to try to find out, what are you doing and what does it mean to me? And when you said that, I mean, really unbelievable back of the neck. It's probably him.
Probably.
It's part of the
I
same
do that
process.
as a shaman. I do that myself. I'm kind of a huntress, though. I mean, I really, I really, up to this point, have taken care of others to protect them from the dark. So
Hmm.
I had to master the dark. I even had to take dark apprentices in order to be able to get the full circle. In my 3-year break I'm on, which is a real break from my maiden and my adult or mother stage, entering the elder stage, because it's important that I allow whatever's going to happen. But I have done that for other people as well. I remember one time I was doing a lot of practices. I would wear a blindfold and walk down a long trail along the river in Seattle. And every day I'd put this blindfold on to just self-train myself as a seer, to get it deeper and deeper. Eventually I was able to see the waking world with my eyes closed. But one day I was having a lot of out of bodies, and I really didn't want to leave my apartment there, because I would walk out of my body and see my body laying on my couch, and I'd look at the time when it happened, and then I'd walk around the room and go in my bedroom and the bathroom, and then I'd come back and lay in my body, and 6 hours would go by, and I just didn't even, that's all I did. So one day I got up out of my body and I thought, okay, today's the day. I think I'm going to go take a walk to the park down the road. And so I flew to the park, and before the trail, and I noticed there was where the kids play on all the swing sets and things like that. And I saw a bunch of teenagers. It was around evening time, around dusk. And there was about 5 or 6 teenagers drinking beer at the table. And I'm just looking at them, looking over at them, and I see that they stand up and they're startled and they're pointing at me. And like some of them throw their beer and look really frightened. And I'm like looking behind me going, what are they pointing at? And I forgot I was out of body. And so, they thought I was a ghost, a dead person. And they all ran. And I thought, they think I'm a ghost. I'm just having an out of body. And and so it taught me a lot from that experience about what I can do to like help people, because I did a lot of work as a full-time shaman and folk healer in the physical world. So I thought, that was like 2001, and I thought, I'm crossing a gate here. And I used to visit someone similar to what you're talking about, your experience, an older guy who lived past Everett, north north in Washington State, and I would go and visit him in his backyard, and he would like teach me how to like create fire on my hands, because I'm a real water fire person. Even though I'm got a lot of air as an Aquarian in this incarnation, I have a strong fire and water principle, constitution. And I used to be amazed at what he would do. And so, yeah, this shaman can teach you. But what happens is there's kind of two paths. There's one where you immerse yourself in the reality of it and have to take all the risks and all the dangers and the hits and the getting back up. And then there is the distant spiritual person where you don't really involve yourself in it and start mimicking what it is. We have that choice all along the way, and we know that's a gate. And sometimes when we're younger, when it happened to me and when I was younger, it's much easier to take risks because you have less to lose, a house, children, But that journey never stopped for me. And I did lose my house and I did end up homeless. And I just meditated on the street when I was homeless, starving. Well, I had, Polish peasants. I know what going without food is like. And so I just incorporated everything into my spiritual practice. And, I respect all teachings. I had a Sufi master one time, a friend of mine who was a reader, kind of like talked to someone as well. And he said, you should come to this circle. It's a Sufi master. And he's like a living saint. And I said, okay, I'll come. So I came, and he did a zikr, which is a song, trance song, turned all the lights down. And as I was just kind of sitting there meditating in the circle with like 25 or 30 other people, he came and he touched his hand, but I knew it was his astral hand. So his body was sitting on his chair, and he was older. I'm sure he's long past now. But he kind of touched my cheek, and I knew it was him, and it was very loving and light, because I'm an empath, so I can feel darkness and light and every grade in between. And so at the end, when it was all done, I'd bought him a big bag of rice, for my gift for him. And so I was carrying it along on the line to make an offering. And I get up there, and he's like, you, to the back. And I'm like, that's normal. At least he didn't spit on me like all masters do. Our native chiefs, our Rinpoches or whatever. So I got all the way back in the line. And when I got up there, everybody's pretty much gone, just kind of his helpers or apprentices. And he was talking in his language to one of his apprentices, I guess. And the apprentice handed him a pair of scissors, and he took and he cut off a piece of his beard. And he said, give me your hand. And I gave my hand, and he put a piece of his beard in my hand. And he said, where you're going from now forth is going to be really dangerous. And he said, if you ever need me, you just pull this out and you call my name, and I will be there to help you and fight off the dark. So, you get little messages along the way, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. And so I was really happy because I was fighting the dark all the time and didn't have a lot of experience. I was still in my 30s. And so I had moved to Seattle, and it got pretty dark then in the early 2000s. And it got so bad. I'm a seer, so I can see shadow running. I can see the light too. The light and the dark are never separated. If some dark entity or person out of body is dark and they get in your space, all you have to do is look around. You'll see the light. The balance is always there. So it was really bad at a particular point, and a lot of things were happening. And I was sitting in my apartment, and I said, oh, his beard, get out his beard. So I got out his beard. I had it folded in a little pink napkin. I went outside to do a little ceremony, and I sat there with it in my hand, and I was hesitating. And at that moment, I said, I can follow a master, or I can take the steps to become one. And so I looked at it and I thought, thank you for your great blessing and gift, but I'm going to take the path. And it was a big commitment for me then, because, I was a fight or flight. Yeah. So I buried it, gave thanks in the ceremony. And yeah, that my destiny changed at that moment. The next morning, I heard a bunch of ravens cawing and cawing, and I'm like, they're awfully loud. They woke me up, and I had to make a living and stuff. It was hard, and I would work as a temp, and I was dreaming a lot then. So I'd dream for like 3 weeks, and then I'd go work for a week, and then come back and dream. And so I opened the door. Everybody else's door on this small apartment complex was nice. Mine had big, huge scratches and welts in the front of the door.
Lord.
And so I'm looking up at the tree, and there's like 2 ravens just cawing away. And I'm like, what up, guys? And they're just cawing and cawing. I look down, and there's a raven spread eagle that had hit my front door and just dropped.
Good grief.
And that was the first time that I was aware, because I had traveled as the Black Jaguar. Once I started leading like soul journeys and dream journeys for people, and paying off more and more karma of my 3 lifetimes of karma, my animism souls started to come back. And so I thought, oh, I got a raven. I just didn't let go. My soul didn't let go quick enough out of the bird. And I would go through the door, and it physical hit the door. So I'm supposed to let go a little bit further back. Yeah. So from that day on, I had the eyes of the raven, and it's like, what's great about being a mythologist and never reading mythology until after an experience, you learn a lot about what it is you're dealing with. So a lot of people do that in reverse. They'll read a lot of mythology, and then they might have an experience, and then they'll go, oh, that's that. I'm a dreamer. I don't have a memory. I can't remember what I did yesterday. I have no rote memory. So I don't read, I don't do anything like that. But this kind of stuff you never forget. So from then on, I could fly as a raven, and it was real convenient. I had my line of Black Jaguar, Black Raven, and it goes higher, but I'm not going to say it because some people are offended in certain traditions if you claim something. And then I had other animals on this side that I could shapeshift into. That's shamanistic animism. And the difference between a sorcerer and a real shaman is that a sorcerer, whether in waking or dreaming, can shapeshift into things that are illusion. And if you meet one in the dream, you just say, show me your true self, and then their little tiger disappears, and there stands a person. But a real shaman, if you say the same thing to, no, it's going to step close to you as a jaguar, and you're going to feel its power, because it's not going to shapeshift no matter how much you call it out. And that's the difference between a sorcerer who's all puff and smoke, the magician, and a real shaman who has a jaguar soul. And it makes a difference because all you're doing is flexing.
I understand.
Your creative. Yeah, your creative self.
Yeah.
Down.
So that was Phoenix talking with me about all kinds of things. And if you want to follow this conversation into the next episode, do stay tuned. It will be issued in about 7 days' time. It will be episode 3 in series 3. And I'll be continuing the conversation with Phoenix. In the meanwhile, thank you very much to Phoenix for participating in this podcast. Thank you to you for listening. And if you enjoyed it, please do share it, like it, and follow the podcast. It all helps. This is G. Michael Vasey saying goodbye.